Big deal as the first of the debates this week, just a few days away. And, talk us through how important those debates are in your mind and how this issue might feature in those debates, how Joe Biden, for example, would navigate that.
Well, the Supreme Court issue is going to be front and center on the debates. Chris Wallace rolled out his litany of issues that are going to be covered on Tuesday evening U.S. time. It's very domestically focused, but the debates are really it's the onus is on Trump to change the trajectory of this race. I mean, as we've discussed, Vice President Biden is sitting around 8-9 points ahead of President Trump nationally. Now, state polls are more important. Ultimately, those swing state polls. But it's going to be a knockdown, drag-out fight, not just the one on Tuesday, but the two following in October. And Vice President Biden really has to focus on a few things. He has to focus on coming off as presidential, drawing a contrast with President Trump when he's attacked. And if and when there are personal attacks, not only on Joe Biden, but also on his family, which President Trump is notorious for, you got to keep your cool. You got to remind the American people that there's an adult in the room. But those attacks will be coming. We know they're going to happen, whether it's on Hunter or Beau Biden. And Vice President Biden's just got to reassure the American people that he's there for them, that he's empathetic with their concerns and their issues, and finally, he's got to ask the American people a question, and that question is, can we afford 4 more years of this, either on health care, on the Supreme Court issues, on foreign policy? Can we afford 4 more years of this?
Well, the president is expecting 4 more years. He says that he was asked about whether or not there'd be an orderly transition, a peaceful transfer of power during the week. Let's have a look, remind our viewers of what was said.
Will you commit here today for a peaceful transferal of power after the election?
Well, we're going to have to see what happens. You know that I've been complaining very strongly about the ballots, and the ballots are a disaster.
I understand that, but people are rioting. Do you commit to making sure that there's a peaceful transferal of power?
We want to get rid of the ballots, and we'll have a very peaceful. There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation.
Alex Tureman at Bondi Partners, what's the reaction to those comments been like, and what sort of protections are in place to safeguard against any such eventuality if President Trump does lose?
Well, Kieran, since 1789, we've had a peaceful transition of power, regardless of party, regardless of whether or not it was the Civil War, regardless of the civil rights issues in the 60s, regardless of the many hurdles that this country has faced. We've always had a peaceful transition of power. So for me, I think it's a little surreal to even be discussing the topic. But following those remarks from President Trump in the White House press briefing room earlier this week, I was encouraged that not only the rank and file members of the Republican Party in the Congress, but also leaders like Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy made statements indicating that regardless of who wins, there will be a peaceful transition of power. Now, I think there's a major concern around a contested election. I don't think the markets would be too devastated if there's a Biden win or a Trump win. But if there is a long-term contested election where we don't know the outcome, that could be extremely negative. And that would provide, if it's 3 or 4 days, it could provide a lot of time for tweets, a lot of time for press conferences, a lot of time for spin. And we all know what happens in those periods is it gets muddied. But there is a silver bullet to this issue, which is squarely in both candidates' hands, and that's the state of Florida. I know since 2000 and prior, it's been a very contentious state in regards to presidential elections. But unlike most states, including Michigan, including some of those other swing states, Florida begins counting its absentee and mail-in ballots about 22 days prior to Election Day. Michigan, for example, doesn't start processing ballots until Election Day. So on the eve of the election, on November 3rd, we're going to know who won Florida. If President Trump wins Florida, I think we're going to see a contested election that takes days to decide. But if Vice President Biden can win Florida, There's not only 29 electoral votes there, but it's almost a nail in the coffin for Trump's map, with the exception of some extremely abnormal math happening in the Electoral College. So it all comes down to Florida, in my opinion. I mean, Kieran, over the past 7 presidential elections, 51 million ballots have been cast in Florida. The difference between Republican ballots and Democratic ballots out of those 51 million is 26,000. So it's going to be a razor-thin margin there, and I know they're fighting tooth and nail.
Alex Tureman, founding partner and CEO of Bondi Partners with Joe Hockey. Thanks so much for your time, Alex. We'll talk to you soon. Let's bring in our local discussion now. Rosie Lewis from